So I said, in the way the ghost actually tells the story of the murder to Hamlet, there is a lot of exaggeration, a lot of dramatization. It doesn't come out spontaneously or naturally. We could see that there are certain techniques and strategies used by the ghost when telling the story to Hamlet. And for example, of course, there is exaggeration and metaphors, a lot of metaphors used by the ghost in the descriptions, but also there is a gradual narration. The story doesn't come immediately. The ghost doesn't spill it out altogether, but in a gradual way. And you can see, for example, in the words that he's using in the beginning, he actually or let's say he mentions the word revenge. He said, so art thou to revenge, without explanation, and but later of course will come the explanation gradually. And this of course gradual narration of the story of course creates suspense. And this is one of the dramatic techniques used in addition to exaggeration and in addition to the metaphors that he's using. After mentioning the word revenge, he uses it again, and then murder. He speaks about murder later. So, and every time we see how Hamlet is astonished, he's surprised, he doesn't put that into question. So he is very gullible. He believes, his credulous, and in here, and as I said, probably this would lead us to the conclusion, to the probable conclusion that probably this is not a real ghost, but it's rather the workings of Hamlet's imagination and Hamlet's conscience, because he is being tormented by his conscience. When we read, for example, how the ghost reveals the details of the story, if you're going to tell me that you were killed, you should not, of course, go into, it's not necessary to go into the very small details and to all these descriptions. And this gradual narration, as I said, this gradual telling of the story, although there's something very important, is that the time is limited for the ghost, as you read here, of course, that he has to go back to the purgatory where he came from, and he has only very short and limited time. So despite the limited time, he actually finds the time to speak in gradual parts, and revealing his story in a very gradual way, instead of just revealing it very immediately and altogether. So here, for example, he says, "'Tis given out that sleeping in my orchard," there is dramatization, there is picturing also of the scene of the murder. You could just say, "I was killed by your uncle," and that's it. But there is dramatization here. I hope you understand what I mean here. And there is also picturing of the different acts, the physical acts, to make the murder palpable, to try to picture it in front of you. So he tells Hamlet, "'Tis given out that sleeping in my orchard, a serpent stung me." We don't know who that serpent was, but of course this is gradual again. So the whole ear of Denmark is by a forged process of my death rankly abused. But know, thou noble youth, the serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears his crown, which means your uncle. "Oh, my prophetic soul, my uncle," says Hamlet. So you see the dramatization, as I said again, with the use of certain vocabulary, incestuous, traitorous, etc. There is judgment, value judgment, and there is condemnation of the act by the ghost himself. Later, we see a comparison that the ghost makes between himself and his brother. Upon a wretch, he speaks about Gertrude, and he says, "Upon a wretch whose natural gifts were poor to those of mine." So he's comparing himself to his uncle. And then he goes on and on describing the details of the murder, how the uncle actually received the poison, and how he poured it into the ears of the ghost of Hamlet the father. etc. And so we go into all the details, although the time is limited. So this is also a question to be asked here. The time is very limited, and he has to go, but he goes into the details in a gradual way, so he's not afraid of missing the opportunity of telling the complete truth because of the shortness of time, using vocabulary like vile, loathsome, etc., and all the description of the details, etc. Thus, and then later he explains again, thus was I sleeping by a brother's hand of life, of crown, of queen, and once dispatched, cut off even in the blossoms of my sin. And here he means that he was killed abruptly, all of a sudden, and he did not have the opportunity to clean his sins before being killed, before he dies and goes to judgment, of course. That's the meaning here. And then I believe the most, well, you understand now my analysis and why I see this, of course, as something that leads us to probably question the reality of the ghost, but also one of the most important clues that we have is how the ghost incites Hamlet, how he urges him to kill, to take revenge. He's not giving him the choice. You have to do it. You must do it. And if you don't do it, then you're a traitor. This is, of course, a summary of the message. And so here, when he says, for example, here, but towards the end of the ghost part, if thou hast nature in thee, he tells him, if thou hast nature in thee, if you have nature in you, bear it not. You don't have to accept that, and you have to take revenge. Let not the royal bed of Denmark be a couch for luxury and damned incest. So you see how he is inciting him, actually. So I believe here, this is probably the most obvious statement and the most obvious part where we could say that probably it's Hamlet's conscience that is speaking here. His conscience, his sense of guilt, and that if you don't do that, you're going to live in guilt, to feel guilty, etc. So another point, another clue. It's when the ghost tells him to spare his mother. You take revenge, you kill the uncle, but you don't do anything to your mother. Leave her to heaven, he says. You can see it here. So he tells him, against thy mother oath, leave her to heaven. Don't do anything to your mother. Leave her to God. God will actually judge her and punish her. So again, we understand that probably it's rather Hamlet's conscience that's speaking here, and that doesn't want to harm his mother again. And so the ghost, of course, here leaves, and Hamlet is in all is probably bewildered by the truth that he heard, and he is not okay. We will see later that he's going to be rather mad, or maybe he was feigning madness, but he's not going. This truth and this revelation is going to bamboozle him. It's going to have a great impact on his psychology and on his life. And this is what he says by the end of this passage, when he says that, of course, I'm not going to forget you, speaking to the ghost when after he leaves. And he says, I'll wipe away all trivial fond records. So everything else is going to be trivial. It's going to be useless and without any importance. And I'm going to forget everything but this one, which is, of course, the revenge that I have to take. All sorts of books, all forms, all pressures past, that youth and observation copied there. And thy commandment all alone shall live within the book and volume of my brain. Thy commandment is the only thing is going to remain here. This is what he says after the encounter with the ghost. So after the departure of the ghost, we of course, he goes back to his friends, and his friends try to understand what happened, but but of course he doesn't reveal to them what happened, and he doesn't want to tell them. He doesn't trust them, but also he doesn't trust himself. He's still not sure about what he heard, and he's still not sure if this was real or not. So he wanted to avoid telling that to these until he actually, of course, thinks about it, and probably he would make a decision. What comes by the end of scene 5 is very interesting, and this is something that I'd like also to insist upon. It's very interesting, and it's a motif, if so to speak, that we can find in many tragedies, including Shakespearean tragedies. In my opinion, this is an example of it, an illustration of it. After, of course, as I said, the ghost leaves and Hamlet is back with his friends, and then we have that scene where he is going to try to make his friends swear not to reveal the truth about the ghost, not to tell anyone that they saw a ghost. So he wants, I'm speaking about Hamlet. Hamlet wants that to be secret between them. So he's going to make them swear not to reveal that the issue of that ghost. And here I believe that the scene becomes rather comic. It's what I would call comic relief, and it's known, of course, something that exists, as I said, in many tragedies, when the playwright tries to give the audience a kind of comic relief of the tragedy. The tragedy is very, of course, tragic. It's very tense, a lot of tension in it. And that's what we had, of course, from the beginning of this play, and with the revelation about the murder and how Hamlet is not okay with what was happening in the kingdom, etc. And then with the ghost and the dramatization of the murder, of course, and you could see, of course, how it's very tense again. But now a comic relief. This is a technique, a dramatic technique, another dramatic technique used by some playwrights in a tragedy in order to relieve the audience and trying to bring a little laugh sometimes, even within a tragedy. This is in my own opinion, of course. Maybe some other people and some other readers would not agree with me that this is a comic relief instance, but I believe it is. Here, when you read Hamlet trying, as I said, to make his friends Marcellus and Horatio swear that they would not reveal the truth, and then the ghost speaks from under the stage and says, "Swear." So Marcellus, Hamlet says, "Upon my sword you have to swear," and then probably they are hesitant or something, and the ghost says, the ghost cries, the ghost who had disappeared, of course, but we hear a kind of echo from under the ground, from under the stage, "Swear," in a very, of course, probably strong voice, an orotund voice. And it becomes even very clearly comic when we read and when we see Hamlet's answer. He says, "Aha, boy," he's speaking to the ghost that says, "Swear." "Aha, boy, say'st thou so? Art thou there, Truepenny?" And then again it is repeated when the ghost says, "Swear, hiccubic." And he then will shift our ground, he says, Hamlet. Then the ghost says, "Swear by his sword." Hamlet says, "Well said, old mole. Canst work in the earth so fast." So you see that it's not tense as in the beginning. Hamlet is not afraid, is not shaken, he's not very tragic here. He's rather making fun, and he's rather actually being humorous with the ghost here. And then comes another very frequently cited quotation from Hamlet, from the book in general, and it's here when Hamlet says to Horatio, I told you in the very beginning, from the first scene, how Horatio is supposed to be a scholar, he's supposed to be a man of science that doesn't believe in ghosts and paranormal things, and who believes only in science. And this discussion, I told you about this discussion, of course, between reason and beliefs and reason and religion, that was very popular in the 17th century, in the beginning of the 17th century, when this book and when this play actually was written. And but And of course, Horatio in the beginning does not believe in the news about the ghost. But then when he saw the ghost, they told him, of course, what now? You saw the ghost and you said, tush, tush, it will not appear, he said in the beginning, of course. And now Hamlet tells him, there are more things, and this is a very, of course, memorable, as I said, quotation from the book. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. About, again, paranormal things, supernatural things, etc. So, a little bit later, we will have also another interesting statement by Hamlet, when he says, the time is out of joint, O cursed spite, that I was born to set it right. And here finishes the scene 5 of Act 1. Oh, cursed spite, that I was born to set it right. So now he he says that I'm going, of course, to take this mission, and I will try and I do my best to set it right. And this is a cursed spite. It's something wrong in the something rotten in the state of Denmark, and Hamlet now is going to be the mission man whose mission, of course, is to correct what is wrong in the state of Denmark. Don't forget the idea of the divine right of the king. It's not only a political, of course it is a political matter, but not only a political matter. And even in the description of the ghost, we could see that, we could feel that, and we could see it, that the idea is also about a divine succession to the throne. It's when you actually break that divine succession, that divine right, you're also doing something against religion, against God. And this is also, so it has, what I want to say here is that it also has, of course, a religious meaning and not only a political signification. Okay, so probably this is the end of scene 5, and what I presented to you, of course, is a kind of reading of the scene, and you have to read it again to read the 2 scenes, but also I presented to you my own understanding, my own interpretation. It's an interpretation of the text, but I'm sure you also have your own interpretation, and you should have your own interpretation. You can agree and disagree with me on the different points that I presented, and this is, of course, what literature is made of. And by the end, by the way, because I forgot before, you can leave your comments under the videos, and we can also engage in discussions, whether with me or also between students. You can engage in discussions about the themes and about the analysis of this play, but also the same thing for the other videos concerning the other subjects. This is what I would like to say in the end, and so that's it. See you in the next video and in the next lecture. Thank you very much.